Guys, are you tired of poor-fitting clothes? Well, I've been there, and it's why I'm stoked to tell you about Barbell Apparel. You see me rocking their gear for a while now, and I'll tell you, the comfort and fit is unmatched, especially for those of us that don't skip leg day. Barbell Apparel is stylish and functional, built to power whatever your work days, workouts, and adventures demand. At Barbell Apparel, satisfaction guarantee is not just talk, it's a promise. Wear it, use it, live in it. Their gear is built to endure your every move. If any issues arise, they have got you covered with repairs or replacements. Barbell's mission is to empower your fitness journey and to help you break boundaries. Life changes, bodies transformed. Whether you're gaining, losing, or evolving, we will swap your product hassle-free for a new size. No questions asked. Go to barbellapparel.com to level up your apparel game, or just click on the link below. Ian Garry, Colby Covington, is there any turning back now? I mean, why would you want to? It's a really interesting spot. It's an interesting spot because getting Colby interested in a fight for anybody that wasn't the world champion has been wildly difficult to do. I mean, even when he took a hiatus to fight Masvidal, but there was a lot on that, right? Not to mention Masvidal was the BMF champion. Not to mention it was going to be a pay-per-view and it was going to be a main event. I mean, there was a few things that were on it. It's hard, and Colby has been the clearest #1 contender of any weight class. Of any weight class, it is more obvious that he was the next best guy to the champion. Okay. And I only tell you that because, I mean, they're fighting to prove things to each other, right? If you prove enough things, we put a belt around you. But whatever you're setting out to prove, the sportsmanship of the sport is that you acknowledge that it's been proven. I mean, I'm just sharing that with you. Colby, on December 16th, understood. I mean, he understood. He came out of there with a very different attitude, which is my next fight will not be a title fight, and therefore, why wait? I mean, it was a totally different attitude. Colby had a broken foot that night. He's heartbroken. I mean, this is terrible, but the cameras are still running. He still has a job to do, and he did a call out. Remember that, guys? It was of Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy fought that same night, same weight class. I could tell Colby had never considered losing that fight because the Wonder Boy call out, it didn't make any level. That wasn't the direction he was going to go. His creativity was of such, with the broken foot distraction, the broken heart that he was dealing with, that that guy, I mean, he just got an idea and goes with Wonder Boy, but there was still a message in that. And the message was that Colby wants Wonder Boy. The message was Colby wants back in there, and Colby is going to have a different attitude, coming in and doing other fights that don't revolve around waiting. Okay. And I knew when he called, right then I knew when he called Wonder Boy, that wasn't the direction that he just opened his eyes. And it was like the first guy that he saw, right? I mean, it really was this type of a thing. Ian Garry has a fight. This timeline matters. Ian Garry fought last, right? Colby's back in December. Ian Garry was Anaheim, guys, 2 pay-per-views ago. 4.5 weeks. Ian Garry has a great win over Jeff Neal. A lot of people watching. Highest ranked guy Garry fought. Split decision. Garry dealing with all the things that Gary's dealing with. He takes that microphone and he called out Colby Covington. And whoever Garry wanted to fight, who he really wanted to fight, because right, he had a little venom going Sean Strickland's way. But whoever he really wanted to fight was the name that he was going to say in that moment, and he did, and it was Colby. Fine. The reason that you need to understand that timeline is because Colby let it go. As I said, that was 5.5 weeks ago. Well, 5 weeks ago, meaning 4 days ago, Colby makes his own promo video and he calls out Garry. But not only does he call him out, he calls him out with stipulations, with criteria, which just make the call out great. It was a mean-spirited call out, right? It was the way you pick a fight. It was great. But what was really wonderful about it, and I feel as though this kind of the psychology here went unnoticed. If you watched Colby call Garry out. It was not in response to Garry's call out, which is what we've been waiting on. Garry called Colby out. Let's hear what Colby says. Colby did not respond to the call out. Colby's call out was as though it was a fresh and brand new idea. Right, the one that's responding doesn't get to lay out the criterion, just for example. So it was great. And then we have Ian Garry's response, which I must tell you was just as great. I mean, if you're looking for the idea of performance and PR and how am I going to do this, and I really do feel like Garry has gotten some very bad advice. Whoever advised him here, maybe it was himself, maybe it was just off the cuff and he didn't need it, but whoever advised him here, whatever I've ever said bad about them in the past, I take it back. They have redeemed themselves because this was perfect. But when Garry responded to Colby, he responded to the tone himself as though he had forgotten that he's the one that started this whole thing by calling him out 5 weeks earlier. Right? It was just great. I watched this go, wait a minute. I think Colby has actually convinced Garry that this was Colby's idea. It was just interesting. It's my only point. It was just interesting. But here you have Garry, who has been in a crisis. He has been in a PR crisis. Star. You got to beat Garry's last 2 fights. His fight in Boston, I've told you guys several times, this guy, this was off the charts. I mean, it would be the biggest pop of the year. Now, it was also the biggest crowd, 17,000 plus, but it was the biggest pop of the year, and I would have told you that, and he would have won that award had Sean O'Malley not been on the same card. Garry was second on the night, but second on the night was still one of the biggest pops of 2023. It was amazing. But I then was at his most recent fight in Anaheim. And it was not that same pro-Garry crowd, right? I mean, he's dealing with something. So the question is, a young man like this, how is he going to deal with it? Is it going to affect him? You would think that a fighter, so what would I care about some boost? They care. They care. It's very hard for me to explain. Like, on one hand, I can make a very good case for you how these MMA fighters are the toughest people in the world. But I could also have to concede back to you, but boy, they are some sensitive little babies. Well, not Garry. I mean, Garry really held well with it. Now, he can walk through this whole thing and be done with it as long as he keeps Sean Strickland and Colby Covington's name out of his mouth, because they're the only two that have any kind of a flame left to this. Everybody else has moved on. So if Garry goes after Sean Strickland or Colby Covington, is Garry, by Garry's own choice, who is electing to continue this story that we all believed was this terrible story for him. Well, apparently not as terrible as we all thought, because he did elect to keep that going. And that's very fascinating. I mean, I must tell you. So now you've got Garry, who has never lost. I mean, think about how long that is. His last, how old is he? Is he 26? Okay, great. Then he hasn't lost in 26 years. I mean, think about that. If a guy's undefeated, and however old he is how many years since he's lost. Colby lost in December. So what do? Can you take a guy who hasn't lost in 26 years and put him against a guy that lost 3 months ago? Because don't forget, the guy that lost 3 months ago is ranked ahead of him. He's got a bigger name. I think the story works. I think it absolutely works. But I think the fact that Garry was one of the most hated guys in the sport, for whatever, right or wrong, I'm not really sure what Garry ever did wrong, but you will concede back to me that yes, it was not going his way in terms of opinion and perception and welcomeness and getting that nice fuzzy feeling, right? And however low he was, Colby in his call-up made sure to go lower, right? Like every story's got a good guy and a bad guy. So you could take two bad guys, you could take two heels and put them together. One of them is going to be cheered. There is not a scenario, and this is a broad stroke, you'll find, but there's not a scenario where the crowd wants to boo this guy and boo this guy. The crowd wants to cheer for somebody. So adversely, they will boo the other guy. And the other guy didn't have to do anything wrong. I mean, I'm just sharing for you because the guys don't understand this. They all want to be more liked than the other guy. You're not going to be more liked than the other guy. One of you is going under, one of you is going over. So I only bring that to you because Colby might be the only guy that could lighten Garry up which is also fascinating, which I think is something Garry would want, which I think would add to a motivation for him to pursue this fight. Look, I think Colby and Garry are going to fight. That's my final analysis. I think that they're going to fight. And if they fight and it is not a main event, which means it's only 15 minutes, right? Like, you got to be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. Garry has a big problem on his hands if he gets locked in there with Colby Covington. He is a big problem. But I believe he has a bigger problem if that match is scheduled for 15. Now, I won't make as though Colby doesn't have his that's a hard night out. Got to go in, got to get inside, got to get that guy down, got to keep him there. Nobody else has done either of those two things. They haven't gotten him down, they haven't kept him down. I'm shy. I admit that's a really hard night. But I don't think, regardless of the fact that one is undefeated and one lost his last fight, I don't think there's any reason that we should believe that the odds makers aren't going to have that close. I think there's any reason that we shouldn't think that that's going to be an anticipated fight. And I don't think there's any reason that we should not, if we're the decision makers, move forward and make the fight.